Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another Coffee and Christ on a Sunday morning with me, Daniel P. Riley, Michael Bacchioni of Life Talks, and Jonathan Upini, the Wellness Dad, plus some special guests if they pop in from our men's group, as usual. We always leave it open to anyone involved in our group to hop in on these conversations. But today's topic is one I wanted to talk about a couple of weeks ago, but with Snowmageddon and me being sick, it didn't actually happen. So we're going to do it now. And that is what God rejects. And I'll start with a very simple example of what I'm talking about. We see it every day, social media, everybody talking about everything. And nobody can figure out what the truth is without having to go somewhere else and do a ton of research. Like, you can't even go to a single, for example, you can't even go to a single news website without overly biased interpretation of an event that happened. And there have been a lot of very polarizing events recently. Now, this comes directly from Proverbs chapter 6, verse 16, 17, 18, and 19. These are 6 things the Lord hates. Yes, 7 are an abomination to him. That's very important. 7, even though he says 6 originally. The first, in the original translation, haughty eyes. What haughty eyes means is pride. Looking at people like you're better than them. A lying tongue. Self-explanatory. And that's what I'm talking about. There's so many people out there just saying random, I'm going to be blunt, bullshit that we don't know what's real and what isn't in any given moment. It's a very difficult life to live when you can't trust the things that you see in front of you or what other people are saying around you. The third thing is hands that shed innocent blood. This is a hotly contested concept, in my opinion, especially recently with arguments over confrontations with ICE. People want to paint, for example, I'll be flat out and say it, that Renee Goodwoman as innocent. No, she wasn't innocent. She inserted herself in front of federal agents in her vehicle and tried to disrupt what they were doing, even though they weren't even actually at the moment detaining anyone. They were trying to free their vehicle from ice and snow, and she decided to get in their way. That's not innocence. Innocence is a bystander. Innocence is a child caught in crossfire from gangs, which I've seen in Philadelphia, which I live outside of. It's awful. That's the shedding of innocent blood, not somebody who gets in people's way and intentionally, for all intents and purposes, tries to harm them. There's no innocence there. Number 4, a heart that plots wicked schemes. Now, we can assume certain hearts are plotting wicked schemes, but we don't know for sure. That's left up to God to decide, in my opinion. Number 5, feet that are quick to run to evil. Now, what it's saying there is not so much literally running towards evil, but what it means is you choose the wrong direction in a given situation, and your choice is predicated on wanting to do something that you know is morally wrong. That's the definition of that one. Number 6, the false witness who utters lies. It's the second time lies are brought up, so I think lies are pretty much the major thing that God despises. And the last one which I find very important. The one who sows discord among kindred. What that means is the person who tries to pit brother versus brother, sister versus sister, father versus children, mother versus children. The person who tries to make us hate the people that we are meant to love most in our lives. Now, I imagine my fellow hosts can think of a couple names they've heard in the media, in social media, etc., who have said things that have put them at odds with their own family. Who've done things that have put them at odds with their own family because we decide to talk about it and take a stand, even though it doesn't directly affect one or the other. That's what Discord is. Chaos. Now, these 7 things, as explicitly stated in the Bible and Proverbs, not necessarily directly from God, Proverbs, but you can see it. I can see it. I can't stand being lied to, whether it's to my face or over a podcast. It viscerally pisses me off when somebody says something that I know is untrue. What do you guys think? I'm gonna stop ranting now.
I think I'm guilty of most of them in my life. That's the first thing.
Well, intentionally?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think so. I mean, well, mostly not, but there was, I think periods where, yeah, you know, I mean, running towards lust. I mean, I feel like I always knew that was wrong, but still I chased it. And that's where the quote where, you know, where we discuss that which I want to do, I don't do, and that which I don't want to do, that I do. It was never like it. There was never pure pride, I guess you could say, for me, speaking for me, where it was just, I think a part of it was like I never manipulated and said evil is good.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really where, you know, where I see the world where, you know, I wouldn't want to push that on other people. I wouldn't want to try to manipulate that and say evil is good and use, you know, as we see manipulation and all that. To touch on your other quite like, yeah, I haven't sowed discord in that sense, you know, like, and I definitely saw, I mean, Dr. Fauci's, you know, up there. I can't tell you how many times that man's name has come up, and it just, you know, I felt like trying to wrestle the words. Like, of course, I don't want people to die. And then, like, I don't want people to die, like, you know, but I also deeply see how easily people can be manipulated, how easy I can be manipulated. You know, yeah. And I think that's what led me deeper into pride. Because then it's like there was the part of me was like, how do these people not see it? And then it's like, well, how much of the clear picture do I see? So there's always, I mean, not always, but, you know, I think there's, you know, stay humble, even when you think you have the answer, you know, humility is always the default that will yield, because you know, you may have 99% of the picture and the person you're discussing has, you know, 10%. You know, but that pride can pull you down to blind you and not see something you might be missing, and being able to better articulate, you know, how you can bridge and be a peacemaker instead of being right.
Right. Good morning, Maji Chan. Yeah, exactly. I mean, in my youth, I freely admit I was guilty of both the pride and the sowing of discord because I was an internet troll. I intentionally got online in the chat rooms to piss people off. Not to make them better, just to make them angry because I thought it was funny. And the pride thing, for a while, I had that I'm the smartest guy in the room mentality. didn't realize until many, many years later that, smart or not, I didn't need to be the smartest guy in the room, and I didn't need to tell everybody or, show them. I just needed to be me. We have a comment from Readout Productions. Scary to think how, at least here in the USA, we're bombarded with lies all day long and remain largely complacent and sometimes coerced by those lies. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely right. And it comes from the threefold. I mean, just in that comment, the lies themselves, the bearing of false witness, and the sowing of discord. That's what our media and our social media is chock full of. It's awful.
I mean, one of the main advisors for Hitler during the Nazi rise up, you tell a big enough lie long enough, everyone starts to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Even the liar.
Even, which is such a scary thought, how simple it is to influence and manipulate even our own brains. And that's why words are so important. So, another Proverbs, death and life are in the power of the tongue. And I think that's one of the reasons why this particular proverb hits on lying. And I mean, many of these things, lying tongue, false witness that utter lies, the one who sows discord among kin, like 3 of the 7 are dealing with the tongue.
Mm-hmm.
Like, our words are so powerful. And I'm with Mike. I mean, I've been guilty of several of these. I mean, and yes, intentionally, like lying tongue. And then definitely, sowing discord. And I think many of us are guilty of that just because in our youth, we like to see folks get a rise, and it's
conflict can be fun.
It can be, and haughty eyes as well. I mean, there are moments where we're all prideful. We talk about that often, and the thing with pride for me is, and I've talked about it recently, like when I changed jobs recently, how I felt that pride start coming in, and I would act as if the pride was a physical person, and I would talk to it and tell it, like, not today, Satan, like get away from me, because you can, if you're aware enough, you can literally feel all 7 of these things start coming upon you once you start doing them. And that doesn't mean you're intentionally doing it. That means we're human, and our brains and our actions will creep into these 7 things that God rejects. Now, the question is, can we become aware enough to stop it in its tracks, to not, to not run to evil, right?
Mm-hmm.
The 5th one, to choose the right path morally. And I think it's tricky, because it takes a level of self-awareness where you just have to be able to stop in the moment and about face and take a different path. But it's doable.
Nothing worth doing is ever easy.
Correct.
And
it's like a muscle.
Yeah.
It's like a muscle, right? Consistency. It's all about consistency. Once you do it once and you recognize those auras or particular physical or psychological signs in you, you're able to recognize them the next time even better, and then the next time even better. So it's like a muscle. You just got to keep on repetition.
Yeah, I think it's an element of discipline, an element of presence, and another element of why.
Yep.
Because seek and you shall find. Yeah, seek and you shall find. And discipline, I think, also goes hand in hand with, like you're saying, repetition, doing what the not always difficult thing, but much of the time the difficult thing to do rather than the thing that feels good. And, growing in the why, because I've said before, just pure discipline, there's plenty of people who work themselves to death, very disciplined, but they're not rooted in their why. And I think that's why I added the presence as well, because it's just, getting out of the monkey brain and hearing God's voice, because your path is going to be genuinely unique. You have to find the answers within. They're not going to come from outside.
I think the presence also helps to stave off selfishness. For example, this week I had a lot of chaos come into my life in 2 days that just threw everything off for me. And I recognized in myself that, say, 15, 20 years ago, I probably would have spent the entire day correcting the mistake and in my head just utterly lambasting the people that caused me to have to do extra work, which is a selfish thought. Why do I have to clean up this mess? But that presence now allowed me to see the actual truth of what was going on, that this person that was supposed to be doing this thing that now I have to do because they're not able to do it. Well, they're in a crisis. And instead of me just thinking, well, why can't they get their shit together so I don't have to do this, which is utterly selfish, I was thinking, I hope they're okay. And I'm going to settle this thing, and hopefully I'll find out that they're all right tomorrow. But I wouldn't have that without that presence of mind and purpose.
Question though, did you have a moment, however brief, where that old thought popped in?
Of course.
Yeah.
Before I knew the circumstance, my eyes rolled. Like, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Because it especially with what it is that it's patterns. I don't want to go in any detail because I don't know that I have permission to share that kind of personal information, but there's a pattern of constant little things, and it's because of what they've been going through. It finally came to a culmination. I shared it with you guys privately in the men's group, so you know what I'm talking about. At least Jonathan knows. I don't know if Michael was in the call when we talked about it, but there was a pattern of little things for a couple of weeks beforehand where it was like, okay, I was in the back of my head, I'm thinking, am I going to get the call today that there's a problem again? And when the phone rang and I saw the phone number on the caller ID, I had that eye roll moment of, oh, here we go. I'm going to be inconvenienced. And then it was, oh my gosh, I'm going to be inconvenienced for my entire day trying to fix this. But then it was, they're in a really dangerous emergent situation, and I care about this person on some level, so my thoughts turn to, gee, I hope they're okay, and I'm just going to hold down the fort for the day, not, man, I'm all screwed for the day and it's their fault, because it really wasn't. But I don't know that I had the presence, say, 20 years ago to be able to do that. Because at that time, I was a much more selfish person. And I probably would have spent the entire day damning their name.
which produces nothing.
Nothing good.
Yeah. I was having this conversation with my boys, and granted, my boys are 8 and 6, so the concept is a little higher level than they can fully comprehend. But I like to have these conversations with them because I think it's just planting the seeds.
Mhm.
I don't expect them to grow into this massive moment of enlightenment, but it's just planting the seeds. And very much so of like, hey, it's okay to have these big feelings and commit some of these things that God rejects initially, but we need to be able to regulate and get ourselves out of this spiral or this folding to be able to do what you ultimately set out to do. Like,
It's good.
for instance, putting on your shoes, you know?
I don't want to put my shoes on.
Exactly. It's like, well, but you do want to go play outside. So one comes with the other. Not always, mind you, but it's winter time. Um, and it's like the sooner you do what needs to be done, you can do what you want to do. And sitting here and saying these, you know, big feeling words and maybe not being the kindest at the moment. One, it's not what God wants us to do. And two, it's stopping you from doing what you want to do.
True.
And it, and I do think it does. Once again, it's like a muscle. Our brain is kind of like a muscle. It just takes repetition to like rewire the neural circuitry in our brain to be able to recognize those moments where you start going into the pride where you're like, man, this is gonna suck for me. It's gonna be such a hard day for me. And it's like anytime that you hear yourself saying me, I over and over and over, that immediately needs to be like a checkpoint. Like,
Mhm.
oh, I think I'm creeping into pride here.
It's a
And
warning
then you start
sign.
asking warning sign, exactly. And you start asking yourself questions.
Yep.
How am I creeping into pride? How can I get out of this? And slowly but surely, you dig yourself out of the hole.
Yep. Indeed. And I mean, it's the pride thing, I think, is the root of a lot of it. If you look at the list, as much as lying is repeated and sowing discord is and the shedding of innocent blood are so powerful things, much of it seems like it's predicated on pride, on selfishness. Is to my mind, thinking about it, why do we lie even when we're not intentionally trying to hurt somebody? Why do we lie? To protect ourselves. What are we trying to protect? Our ego, which is pride. So the lies are to protect our pride.
Yeah, I think that's where the identity, what your identity rooted in Christ, that's where it comes, because it's like the personal, like you're saying, the ego. I have to protect this person. I have to keep this image. Versus when you're rooted in Christ, there's that. It's growing really in surrender. Nobody can attack the real you when you're rooted in Christ. They'll attack, but our response to it is rooted in how we respond. And I think that's another indicator as well. You know, the reaction, which ties into what you're saying, where I think Jonathan was saying, it's like that voice that comes up.
Goblin
It's no
brain.
longer, yeah, it's no longer identifying with that goblin brain. You're not, you see it. And it's like, I've heard so many people over the years that, they use different words for it, right? Like the watcher, you're observing this kind of chaos and not, grasping onto it. I heard another example a while back. It's like you're you're a monkey in a cage and the door in the back is open, and here you are in the front trying to get out, and the door is open in the back, you know,
hanging
and
off the bar screaming.
Yeah, it's really crazy. There's a banana in the
your
front.
Poop everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, you're standing in a cage full of shit. And
the door wide open, but you're too preoccupied with getting out the front.
Yeah. And maybe that's really, you know, seeing how all things work for the good. Here you are in a cage full of shit trying to get a banana outside of it. Someone's, you know, luring you in with a banana. And after a while, it's like, you know, that's how I think also paradoxically, you know, the negatives can work for the good. You know, loss of a loved one, for example, you know, those are those moments in life where it kind of, you know, reminds you to really being present with the people you do have in your life, you know. So, you know, things like, you know, obviously there's mourning and there's grief that goes with anything like that. But, you know, those definitely are reminders, and they slow you down and helps you appreciate life if you have the eyes to see it.
True. Very true. One of the topics that recently, and I brought this up yesterday in the men's group too, that kind of espouses this is the hurricane around ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Department. You watch the news, and the hot takes that repeat over and over and over again are that they're not trained well. They don't know what they're doing. They need to be reformed. And on their face, those statements seem like they could possibly be true. And you could certainly make an argument for those statements to potentially be true. Maybe the officers involved in these recent confrontations that ended up deadly were not trained very well. But maybe they were. We don't know. We, the observer, like you were saying, the watcher outside of the situation, we don't know for sure. So what we do in order to create a perspective is we perceive. And what we perceive is a bunch of people saying that these federal agents are incompetent over and over and over again. And like we just discussed, you say a lie enough times, people start to believe it because it establishes a behavior pattern. And unfortunately, what we know from sensationalist media politicians is that they do this stuff on purpose. They repeat these things on purpose, specifically to convince people that they're true. It happens on both sides of the aisle. I'm not saying it's specifically only a Democrat thing that's done. It's a manipulation tactic that's been deployed in our society for well over 50 years. I believe it actually started in the 50s.
Well, you could even go as far back to Plato's allegory of the cave too, you know.
Yep.
Not as a policy, obviously, but, you know, an idea.
But if you think about it, when I was growing up as a child, I was not aware of the political spectrum. Nowadays, like watching my daughter grow up, she was forced to be aware of it because it was in her face constantly. And why was it put in her face? In order to manipulate her. It was put in front of every eye that could see it, which is very similar to what you were talking about, but it's taken to a higher degree where now instead of letting children be children, there's forced indoctrination. They're being made aware of things that are outside of their control and being told that the thing that's outside of their control is wrong and they should be unhappy about it. I mean, I own a daycare. We don't talk politics in the center. Our kids learn and they play and they have a good time because they're children, and that's what children should be doing. They should be learning and they should be enjoying themselves. Our whole doctrine is happy, healthy, and safe. That's it. But we read news articles of elementary school kids being taught political activism. Why? What does it do for them? Nothing.
The children or the teachers?
Yeah.
The
right.
children, it does nothing. But for the
exactly.
organization that is leaning into indoctrination, it's
Yep.
a very powerful tool. Great future soldiers, right?
Yeah, but that's sowing discord, and it's sowing discord in our children.
Yeah.
Why are young people so anxious nowadays? It's because we sow discord into our children before they were even physically capable of understanding it.
Correct. I mean, the prefrontal cortex doesn't even fully develop until the age of about 25. And that's the major decision-making center in the brain. And the fact that we pump our kids with all of these things that you just discussed is just wild. Just wild. And that's one of the reasons it is. And Daniel, I mean, you're a parent as well. We also indoctrinate our children. It's just we you know, we have a choice on what we indoctrinate with, and there's a big difference.
Yeah, my indoctrination was to try and teach my daughter to succeed at life far faster than I did. That was my only goal. That was my indoctrination. I let her think for herself, but I was going to teach her everything that she needed to do in order to succeed at life, but faster than I could have.
Yeah, that's why I was during 2020, Love Your Enemy really stuck with me. Obviously, this isn't parenting, but based off the same premise, where what I saw was that you had people on one side believing a lie, and then you had a very small minority of people perpetuating a lie. And that was, to me, the enemy. And
I think the enemy was the lie.
Yes, the enemy is the lie. But the problem is that I'd argue most people are believing in the lie. So they're not the enemy. And when you make them the enemy, that's where all this conflict came in. But to be able to, that's really where led me back to the idea of surrender, which doesn't mean, and we spoke about this when I read that mile-long Gandhi quote on passivity, passivity versus aggression versus the assertive approach. And the assertive has the element of response. You're listening to the other side. And also the willingness to walk away from someone who isn't willing to listen, which happens, which too is, I've said this before, it's really such a simple truth, but just asking questions, right? Especially when you're confronting with lies, right? Just asking questions, right? Testing spirits. Where's the root of this belief system coming from? And you really don't, it's like you become an investigator almost, where are these, to use your word, this is another word I've thought about a lot, is patterns, right? There's just these patterns. Because you ask a couple of questions, you'll know very quickly, is this someone that, is there a space where we can have a dialogue with, or is there not? And then if there is, even asking another question can expand more rather than telling a person what. Yeah, and same thing with children, right? I'm not a father, but correct me if I'm wrong, right? You know, instead of badgering a kid to do something, or even, someone who's older, let's say they're dabbling with drugs or alcohol, saying don't do that probably isn't the right thing to do. That goes without saying. But understanding why, getting to the root of why, and what is this benefiting from you? You don't have to go too deep to get a child to think for themselves, right? In the sense that that's how you facilitate that, right? It's like, or even another example, like you want a kid to tie his own shoes. You don't want to always be tying his shoes. In the same way, you want your kid to think for themselves, and more so why this thing is good, not just telling them what is good and what is bad, because then they're just repeating what you are saying, which if that's the case, then they could also repeat the lie. The goal is to get them to get rooted into the why of why something is good, right? Because then it's naturally, then you get deeper into that. Then that's the obedience to God. Then there's a willingness to obey God rather than just following what you're saying is good, because that's what my parents told me.
But I think that's
Same
the
thing
key
with
right
the
there.
TV.
I think that's the key
Yeah.
right there. Like a lot of people, we talk about building a foundation, right? Not only ourselves, but also in our children. And a lot of folks, I mean, myself included, I have moments where I'm just throwing the what. I'm just throwing the what at my children and thinking like, oh yeah, that's gonna build the foundation. But it's not. Like that's not a solid foundation. That's a building a house on sand, as Jesus would say, right? Like the first big storm is gonna wash it away. Like what are we building our foundation on? And what we need to build our foundation on, and children's foundation on, is the why, like you were saying. And it's the to your point of like, don't do this, don't do that. There's a time and place for that, but
Always.
it's usually in regards to safety stuff for me.
Yeah, it
Like
depends on the
that's
age, I think,
yeah,
too, right? Obviously,
yeah,
you're telling a
absolutely,
3-year-old, don't touch the oven, right? And
yeah,
Well, the best example for that, in my experience, is if a 3-year-old whacks another kid with a toy, and you ask them why, their answer is going to be, "I don't know," because it's not logic. What it was emotion, and emotion is not tied to logic in their minds at that point. They don't have the developmental capacity to say, "Well, I was mad at them, so I hit them." It was just, I was mad, but you ask why, and they go, "I don't know," because to them it's not something that they can rationally explain. It's an irrational feeling. You ask a 5-year-old, "Why'd you hit your friend?" and they go, "Well, he took my toy away from me." Logical thing that you can discuss. Now you have a why. So definitely there's a time and place for, it's not okay to hit each other versus why shouldn't we hit each other. And both of those things are in unison, are great foundational tools, because you set a precedent when the child's too young to understand the why part, but then you reinforce the precedent with the explanation when they're old enough to understand it. And it's just like with the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill. Not saying why you shouldn't kill, just says don't do it.
yeah,
Later on, it explains why murder is wrong, but in the moment, it's just don't do that.
yeah. I've started recently uh, diving into certain aspects of Christianity, diving deeper into like the why. Like, how do we know that God created everything? How do we know the story of Noah was actually true? Like from historical, archaeological findings, all that stuff. Just because knowing the what, like, cool, there, you're, the Bible is the most epic book that anyone can ever pick up. And there's a bunch of what in there. There's also why in there. But in order to go out and create disciples amongst all nations, and for me, it starts in my house, I need to also know the why. I also need to know why we should believe these things, not just,
As the rockiest road.
oh, dude, and that's okay. I'll take it.
Well, I think at the core of it too is a big. You can't escape it. Is faith, and
Right.
that's not.
That's
And I remember
the rockiest road.
Charlie Kirk was articulating this, was that, you know, logic can only explain so much stuff, you know.
Yes.
So, and it's necessary, right? There's definitely an element, but at the bedrock is faith. We're choosing to believe this. So, you know, it's a leap. It's a leap of faith, like anything. Anything you do, you start a business, might not work out. How do you know? You know, and that's rooted in you know, to see things that we don't have, to see things, to see based on belief, and you don't know without the evidence of it being presented to you.
Faith requires courage,
Yeah.
because in order to have faith, you have to be willing to be wrong. And you have to be courageous enough to accept that. In my opinion, anyways, because faith is not predicated on why. There is no why. As God said, I am. So faith is predicated on things are what they are,
So
not
that's the why.
your explanation of how they occur. You know, why does lightning strike? Well, we figured out the math for it, and then, well, how come it did this? We figured out the math for it, and then it did this thing that doesn't make any sense. It's just part of faith. You know, you can explain away a ton of stuff, but randomly occurring instances of things, aka miracles, dictate that we are not ever capable of knowing as God knows. We're humans. Yeah, we're made in his image, but we're not God. So the only way to exist in faith is to exist with the courage to never know for sure. And I struggle with people who dive so headlong into faith where they don't even care whether or not they know things. That frightens me, because to me it feels like you're easily manipulated. If enough people say God said do this, you'll just go and do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the aspect of, you know, like you just said, only having, like, faith is the foundation. Like, that is the bedrock. I 100% agree. But having those other things, those other facts, to essentially tools in the tool belt, right? Like, that's not only what I want to equip myself with, but I also want to equip my family with, and anybody else I come in contact with, because it does it. If someone says God says this, and if they keep telling you it over and over and over, well, it can be completely opposite of what's actually in the Bible itself. And I don't want to fall into that trap, nor do I want my children to fall into that trap, my family to fall into that trap. So being able to back it up with some information is, in my mind, crucial. But faith is, of course, the foundation of it all. Like, I don't think, I had a pastor once tell me the Holy Trinity, right? Like he's like, there's really no explaining it. That's something we just have to believe. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, like that. Why is it? Why are they all God? Why is one all like? There's really no explaining it. It's just one of those things that you just have to have faith on, and I take that at face and faith value. Like it is what it is. But it's interesting about faith because there's a quote: faith and fear both require belief. It's just
True.
choosing what to believe in.
Yep.
And I think fear is also rooted at a lot of these things, what God rejects. Like God did not put in us a spirit of fear, right? He put in us a spirit of courage. And a lot of these things are fear of looking like a fool, going back to the ego, fear of losing the things that we got in this world. But things of this world matter not, according to God. The challenging thing is we have been so hardwired to focus on obtaining the things of this world. And that's something that I still struggle with, and I think I will continue to struggle with because it is such a hardwired thing.
Yeah.
And there are things, right? And there are things that we in this world we do need to focus on, like having a roof over our head, putting food on the table. Like those are certainly things of this world, but those are things that are necessary to sustain living, especially the food on the table. And but the other things, like worrying about a car getting scratched, does it really matter? No. Why do we get so upset about it then? Well, because I just spent a bunch of money on it. But does that matter? God would say
Placed
no.
value.
Yeah.
Putting value on things that ultimately don't matter, but it becomes a part of pride because it defines your quote unquote identity, which is defining your ego. On the topic of faith and whether or not things are true or not, I'm doing some personal research that's probably going to take me down some really weird rabbit holes. I just wanted to share this real quick because it'll come up sometime later this year as I finish it, and I'll bring it out to everybody. But I have a theory on both Islam and the Mormon religion that's probably going to be very upsetting for most, because both of those things are predicated on humans who told the world that they were prophets.
Man, you are diving deep. Let's go.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting bit of research. I'm not sure how it's going to play out, but I've been reading into Islam a lot in order to get as much information as I can. And I'm starting to read more into the Mormon religion for the same purposes. And I'm seeing some parallels that are concerning me. So I want to dive into those parallels and see if there really is something there that's true, or the potential for for lack of a better term, a mass acceptance of a lie.
What's interesting? So my wife and I were currently reading through the Bible, and we are. Well, I'm in Genesis, and the part
I love
where,
Genesis.
right, part where I just finished reading it. It's where Abram sleeps with the maidservant Hagar because his wife Sarah told him to, because she was unable to have a child. They have Ishmael, and then eventually, they have Isaac, Sarah, a little bit of jealousy, tells Abram at that time. I don't think his name has been changed to Abraham yet, but tells him like, hey, she needs to go. And your firstborn son needs to go too. And like that hits hard because being a parent, like you never want to tell your children like go, leave, like you're no longer welcome here. But God still takes care of them. She goes to the desert, no food, no water, and she cries out, and God still takes care of them, and tells Ishmael that like there will still be like bounty for him. Like his offspring will still, create not to the point of Abraham, the covenant that he made with Abraham, but he still says that he will produce a lot of people, and that is where Islam, the religion, well, it's thought to believe that that's where that religion came from.
Yep, the line of Ishmael.
Yeah, and then the line of Isaac is Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating that God still takes care of this, knowing that it is going to create what we see today. And that just ties right back into what Mike was talking about. Love your enemy. God, it's just wild. Like he still loves Ishmael and Hagar to take care of them, because he could have ended it right there. Boom.
Didn't have a reason to. At least I can't prescribe. I can't pretend to know what God was thinking. God is God. I will never have a grasp on the infinite that God has in order to really understand it. But based on the book of Genesis, the best interpretation of that I can come up with is that God, his intention was to take care of his children, period, unless they turned so far away from him that he could no longer reach them. So Ishmael and Hagar had not turned away from him, and he had a covenant with Ishmael's father, and he loved his creations, the children of Adam and Eve, and all throughout history. So my theory with that was, at that time, there was no reason for him to deny them, because the Bible and many quotes that speak directly of what God says to people are all predicated on, I am here for you as long as you don't turn away from me. If you walk far beyond my reach, I can't help you. And his reach is only in their faith, basically, in their belief in him. And to a certain extent, from what I've learned, much of Islam's religious doctrines are still pretty close to, not all of them, but most of them are pretty close to the general tenets of Christianity. There are certain things that divulged into the completely absurd, in my opinion, but at that time, in that moment, there would be no grace, no forgiveness for us if God went, okay, well, in 3,000 years, the people that came from your bloodline are going to do awful things. So I'm just going to shut you down now because someone didn't exist and won't exist for thousands of years was doing bad things. We wouldn't exist.
Right.
Because human nature, free will, it's always been I'm going to give you a chance to do the right thing. That's how I interpret God's love for us, is I will give you many chances. As long as you don't pass a certain threshold where I can no longer reach you, I will continue to welcome you back and try to give you greatness. As we
What is
saw,
that threshold though?
well,
Like-
it's odd to say. Like if you think about it, Sodom and Gomorrah,
Yeah, but
an example of a society that went too far from God.
yeah, Old
And-
Testament though, right?
Yeah, they were etch-a-sketched off
Yeah.
the board.
Babylon.
Yeah, those are examples of going so far away from, even though I can't even get into it right now because we'll be sitting here for a whole nother hour. But if you think about it, Babylon was literally people trying to get into God's kingdom. So they were literally trying to go to God physically.
Yeah.
And God was like, everything you're doing to get close to me is taking you far, far away from me. This needs to stop. Cut it out, guys. All right, fine. You're done. So the line was drawn. But that story always tickles me because they're literally physically trying to get there, and God's like, that's not what I said.
I told you to go amongst the world, like not just stay in one spot. And then you build this big old tower to try to get into the kingdom. Yeah. My thing is
be cool people and do good stuff, not build a giant ass tower and try and poke me in the foot,
For real. My thing is, they got new covenant, right? Christ dying for our sins. We're never too far away. There's nothing anyone can do that will ever make them too far away from redemption, from being born again. Like,
true, according to the new covenant.
Correct. Old Testament, sure. God takes his chunk off and just every once in a while. But new covenant, Christ died for us. Doesn't mean go out and, run to evil. No, it doesn't mean be a jackass, right? Like we were talking about yesterday.
Yeah.
But it means that we always have a path back. There's always a path back. Starts with faith, but we're never too far gone, which is just, even if you're a practicing Muslim. I have a friend, and he's in our group. He said he's been on a call or two, but he converted from Muslim to Christianity because he also saw the inconsistencies in the Quran.
Yeah, I met a few myself.
And that, I mean, how many times do we hear prisoners that have committed murder, right, be born again while in prison? You're never too far gone, folks. That's God and Jesus sat at the table with sinners and tax collectors, and guess what? We're all sinners. So thank God for Christ.
Yep. And
Well, wait, Daniel, didn't you say faith? The element of faith is the willingness to be wrong, which requires courage. You said that
Yes.
earlier, right? So what's interesting about that? I mean, that's literally Christ, right? It's like this is.
Go ahead.
What's that?
I was just saying,
Yeah.
I was saying hi to somebody in the chat.
Oh, but it's because it's like, I mean, on the ultimate as Christ is that there's the element built into surrender, that he's preaching the truth, but he preaches it to death. It's like when you put your idea out there, you can very quickly see it's like if it's built on ego or not. Because if you genuinely believe what you're believing and you're not like forcing it on other people, but you still double down on what you believe, there's this kind of freshness there. But the ego does not want to be wrong. But
Right.
the shift to, you're welcome to believe whatever you want to believe. I'm not going to push it on you, but this is what I believe. That I could just see it within myself, right? Because there's moments in our lives where it's like, no, this person's wrong, I'm right. And it's like letting that go. You're still going to get so much backlash on that. And that's where even with that, right, we're equipped with, when we have that adversity, the shift into using that as fuel, right? Because what's so interesting is, like, as Christ is going through his persecutions, it only proves him more right. So what they used to try to make him look like the villain, they became the villain. And that's where it's like you see even Judas killing himself, right? In a sense, right? Because it's like what he was trying in trying to get something out of it, he ended up destroying himself. That's the beauty of it. That's where it's like you don't have to, the ego has to defend itself, but you do on a certain level, right? When you're defending Christianity, but on another level, it's just like, no, it's like, if you don't go, supposing you are on the right path and you were genuinely following Christ, it really is true. Your enemies will destroy themselves. You don't have to, was it Roman? I think Romans 12:19. You don't have, what's that?
You're getting there. Go ahead.
You really don't have to do anything. Like it's to the ego, you have to defend it. You have to, but when you genuinely see it, and the key word genuinely, because if you don't genuinely believe it, then I think it's still a passive thing. Because if you don't genuinely believe it, then I think when opportunities arise, you don't meet, because Christ was the assertive approach. You don't genuinely meet it from an assertive approach, because there may be opportunities that arise that you do confront them. But if it's built on the surrender, then they'll be handled the right way. I think an example would be, it's exactly that. I mean, maybe an example would be if someone's not living a healthy life, to tell them this is why you should do this and this is why you should do that. The best example is to live a healthy life and to be the example. So you can apply it to so many different things. But if you try to force it, and what?
And be welcoming.
Yes.
But one of the things you said, I almost started doing the Jack Nicholson meme. It was like, yeah, you're getting there. One of the things you said was defending Christianity. You don't have to defend Christianity. You don't defend God. God doesn't need us to defend him. I am. He exists. Period. End of story. So none of us have to defend God. The only things that we're as according to the new covenant, the only things that we're expected to do is speak of him and be welcoming to anyone who wants to listen. But the trap is that there's a bit of ego and pride in there where we feel like we need to defend God against people that say things about God that are untrue. But like you said, if you're rooted in faith, you don't even need to defend yourself. You simply are you. None of that hurts. The lies that are told, they don't affect you.
And then but even with that, it's like, as you're rooted in that, it's almost like you're going to be attacked more.
Mm-hmm.
But we're told we're going to be attacked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what
Maybe
the
not
armor
physically,
of God
but
is.
Correct.
It's an impenetrable shield. If you are who God has designed you to be, nothing can touch you. The true you, which is your soul. Yeah, somebody could literally shoot you dead, but then you just go to heaven and you win. So they're just making you win the game even faster.
Yeah.
But that's what the armor of God is. The armor of God is the understanding that you are what God made you to be, and all things that you do are to glorify Him. And therefore, the things that people say, the discord that people sow around you cannot touch you, and they'll get theirs when it's their time to stand before God. But human nature makes us impatient. We want our smiting now.
Yeah.
We want the person that's yelling at us to get hit by that bolt of lightning. That's not how it works. If you being rooted in faith is to be patient. All things in God's time. Like, for example, I could spend every day anxiously frustrated with the fact that I'm not a prolific and well-known author. Or I could focus my attention on continuing to write the stories that I feel compelled to write, the divine inspiration that flows through me onto the page that I then put out into the world. And in God's time, the messages that He's relayed, that I've translated into what I've written and put out into the world, will be received by who God wants it to be received by. It's that simple. But if I don't write those books, then it's not going to happen. If I don't live my life, God can't work through me. If I don't do Coffee and Christ on a Sunday morning, nobody hears about this stuff.
And I think that's the other aspect of faith, Daniel, where when an individual, faith can also lead to paralysis sometimes, paralysis of action, where we get stuck in that pattern of God will take care of it. God will take care of it. God will take care of it. I don't have to do anything. God will take care of it. And it's like, God will take care of it.
It's a false interpretation of the word, though.
Correct, because faith without works is dead, right? Paul said it.
Right.
And it requires us to get off our butts and actually do stuff. Like, Jesus did not just sit in one place speaking His ministry. He traveled far and wide in those times.
Well, the apostles were hungry. Jesus did not, throw the entire ocean at their feet and pile up a bunch of fish. He told them to go put nets out.
Yep.
Go do something, and you will be rewarded. That simple.
You're never too far. This is the message for today. You're never too far gone. Go out and do something. That simple.
Yeah, pretty much. Do what God is leaning you towards doing, even if it's not something that you're comfortable with. That's the big thing.
Yeah, like this,
it may
Daniel.
Not be what you want, but it's what God's asking of you.
Let's rewind the clock. Let's rewind the clock 4 years. Could you ever imagine, like, Mike, you're a bit of an extrovert to an extent, right? Like you always want to do live talks and stuff like that. I personally never saw myself doing something like this. Talking to however many people.
No, but I'm not, though. That it just ties into Daniel's point. I did something that I'm not comfortable with. When I was younger, it was more of like a naive extrovert. I guess you can say an ignorant positivity, like when,
Yeah.
Yep.
And it was based on it didn't have any roots. So and then I went to deep introversion, you know, to use Daniel's example, circling around the hole. So I was jumping in the hole, but I'm like, all right, the hole, yeah, and to unpack that, the hole is just, you know, essentially life. You know, oh yeah, I understand it. The hole is making the jump into whatever you're doing. You know, my jump was like, oh yeah, I'm working out. I have, you know, very positive emotion, and yeah, I got it all figured out. And then in that hole, I'm like, there's much more to life than this, you know. And then kind of then saying, wow, so many people are jumping in the hole. Entertainment, the circus of life, right? You know, just loud noises, right? And then I just went into deep silence, like people are missing it, and that was the pride, right? Like, oh, they're not getting it, and I'm like, well, I'm still not getting it. You know, I get a little bit more, but and then Life Talks was just kind of like, you know, just diving into, well, you got to enter the arena, you know, and that's where we're just like, I've said it a million times. That's where we're just like the vaccine, like that to me was just like, people got to speak about this, right? And then that was really like, well, how do we speak about this? But, you know, and I think I had one debate because I just saw so many people debating. I'm like, that would be cool. That would be an experience, like to moderate a debate, you know, so that both people are heard, but like, what is true? You know, that, because that's really what's important. Is the vaccine good or is it bad? Let's have a discussion. And that's, I didn't see debate on those kind of topics. You see debates on everything else. But when I saw that, there was very few channels that had that, you know, because I want to hear both sides. And then that's where just like, okay.
Find the truth that way.
Yeah, but but that's where it led to that the assertive approach is the hardest approach to have, but it's the most, and the reason it is, I think, the hardest is because assertive welcomes conflict, right? Which that's why I think Gandhi said it right? Is because the passive approach is just avoiding all conflict altogether. The aggressive approach is always looking for conflict, and the assertive approach is welcoming conflict, but it's interested in, I believe, the truth. It has the most power, but you have to be, I think you have to battle with that line, you know, because when you enter the arena, you're not going to get it right all the time. I'm going to have views that are going to be wrong. You know, which goes back to the whole grace thing with what we were just talking about. You know, thank God our enemies aren't, you know, smited immediately, right? Because how many times have I got it wrong? If I would have been gone a long time ago. So that grace has to be shared.
Exactly. For me, my pride struggle is I wish no one needed to know who I was in order to hear my stories. And I say it in all conversations all meetings, conversations that I have about how to, you know, advertise, market your books with my clients and everything. I understand completely where they're coming from. They don't know how to do it, and I know how to do it, and I freaking hate it because it requires putting yourself in front of everyone. And we all have that fear of being analyzed. Because then it points out all the little deficiencies that we do carry with us on a daily basis. And pride doesn't want us to see those. So that's why I am here with my face on the internet, having these deep conversations with you gentlemen every other Sunday. Because I hate doing it, but I recognize that this is what is expected of me.
Yeah, and the courage to be wrong is really the biggest thing too, because I think the courage to be wrong is really just it's just powerful. Because, you know, I often watch PBD podcast, and one of the things that he says that I absolutely love is he'll make a point. And he'll say, please destroy my point. Please help me see where are the viewpoints that I have that are wrong. I want you guys to attack it. Awesome. That to me speaks deeply to me. That's why we have the three of us on here. If one of us says something stupid, awesome. Daniel's going to attack it. He's going to make the face like, what the hell are you talking about? And it's one of two things. Either, I'm not articulating my
eyebrow comes up.
Yeah. I'm not articulating my point well enough, or I'm wrong. So and great, because it's, if I'm wrong, I want it, because then it leads me back on the right path. Not interested in looking right.
You want to be right.
Yeah.
You want to be true. That's the important thing. But one of the first steps in becoming true is to avoid these things that God rejects. The lies, the sowing of discord, the running headlong towards evil, the shedding of innocent blood. I think that's a good point to wrap things up. So, Michael, where can everybody find you?
Find me on Life Talks. You can just enter my name here, and all my links are on there, but mostly on YouTube.
Yes. And Jonathan, what about you, brother?
On all the socials, X, Instagram, at _wellness dad. You guys want to chat about anything, faith, fitness, family, finances, anything, reach out. Happy to chat.
Justin at Evely Music says, you guys need to accommodate my Sunday morning schedule better, please. Well, that's the beauty of this sort of thing. You can either show up for the live streams. He says, I don't get home from church till 11-ish. Gosh. But you can show up for the live streams, or you can leave a comment in the video that's posted after the live stream, and we can discuss these things. That's why I put that little banner at the bottom of the screen there. You have questions that you want us to, bandy about in our specific way, leave a comment. You can also reach out to any of us to join our group. We have a Discord where we talk semi-regularly. If you have questions, you can post them there too, and we'll get into them on our Saturday meetings, which are private, or we can bring them up right here on Coffee and Christ on Sunday morning. I guess I should probably tell everybody where you can find me too. I am Daniel P. Riley of whimsyland.org, literary coaching and services. If you're interested in telling your stories, I can help you with that. You can also find me on X at Mr. DP Riley, and of course here on the Whimsyland channel on YouTube. I'm going to end the stream as I always do. Get thee to church. Except for Justin, who's already gone. We'll see you guys next time.